Well, hey, friends, Darren Bailey here with another episode of, we've got to name the podcast, and I was struggling with that. Right now, we're just doing Darren Bailey on all of these platforms to make it easier to find, but Darren Bailey Free Talk, I'm not for sure. You might think about that, and we did that quite some time ago, and I haven't found any names that just hit yet. So, but we're continuing to grow through technological issues, most of which is caused by me. And but we're going to get there. Thank you so much for your following. Continue to push these messages out. And I am excited today to have a good friend, a good supporter, a young man who's just as passionate about our future here in Illinois as we are. And Collin Moseley joins us today. Collin has served as my legislative aide. He's served as a campaign. He was an amazing, very important aspect throughout the journey these last 2 years for governor. And Collin very well represents the future of Illinois, the future of our nation. And right now, he serves as the executive director for the Illinois Freedom Caucus, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to make sure that everyone is up to speed and understands that there is a Freedom Caucus in Illinois, and he's going to share some facts about that. But before we get into that, Collin, I see you early voted in this talk. Let's talk about that. This should be airing on voting day on April 4th. School board elections, we got to make sure people vote. But you voted early.
That's right. Yeah, well, thanks, Darren. So good to be here on your show. I feel like I'm on Ben Shapiro or something going on. So, but yeah, local elections are so important. And so I made it a point to cast my ballot today, as you all should too, because we found, the last 2 years that mayor races, city board, school board, these are the frontline defenses for our country. And it's frankly where we're going to stop a lot of this indoctrination and extremism. And so, yeah, I cast my ballot today, and I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, local control. Everything starts, our problems, we've talked about this before. They exist from the top down. We know that. Right. Got a terrible governor. Even the Illinois Republican Party's got issues. But we can solve all this. But it starts from the bottom up. Right. Precinct committee people got problems with your schools. Run for school board. Run for your city council, and create change there. You're tired of your property taxes being too high. Well, guess what? School boards, park boards, library boards, county boards, city councils. They're the ones that sometimes spend money that things that we love, things that we want, but things that we can't afford, and that's the reason our property taxes are out of control.
Right.
And speaking of which, we've got an amazing group in the House, of which I was blessed enough to start with these men in 2019 when many of us were first elected to the House. And it's called the Illinois Freedom Caucus right now. And there are some absolutely amazing things taking place there. So if you would, talk to us a little about, I think a lot of people have heard about the National Freedom Caucus in Congress. Tell us how all this is put together and how all this functions here in Illinois.
Sure. Well, and the most recent, activity with D.C. Freedom Caucus has been these awesome rules they've negotiated in Congress. The speaker's vote was delayed for several days because our Freedom Caucus members held the line and said, no, we're not doing business as usual, and we want this, this, and this for our people, and we got it. And so now
we get to talk about term limits.
Right.
We get to talk about spending limits.
Right.
We get all this
spending bills.
Yes. So Republican leadership acknowledged and put on paper that, yes, we will do this now. Whereas if everyone just would have fallen in line and rubber stamped it like some of our congressmen did, obviously we would see no immediate change, and probably in 2 years we'd be asking the Republican Party, what did you accomplish? But anyway, that's not what's happening here in Illinois.
So Illinois Freedom Caucus, which is we are a subset of DC Freedom Caucus. So the State Freedom Caucus Network was founded about a year and a half ago by people who realized that the battleground is increasingly in the states. The states are where the frontline battles are taking place for legislation and public policy. And so the Illinois Freedom Caucus is the conservative North Star of the General Assembly. We've got 7 guys, like you said, you served with them. You've got Chris Miller, our chairman, Blaine Wilhauer, Adam Niemer, Dan Caucus, Stevens, Brad Halbrook, David Freeze, and Jed Davis. Jed's from up just west of Chicago. So we have grown in the last General Assembly, and we stand, with the frontline conservative defense, common sense, truth, and logic. It was absent a lot in Springfield, and we're trying to kind of bring that back to light in the General Assembly.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jed is amazing.
Jed's
I got
great.
in immediately and endorsed him from a tax hiking rhino, and Jed's from Yorkville, so I want to make sure we understand that when you talk about our friends up there and you say, yeah, you're up around Chicago. No, actually, this is where I'm from.
Right.
So
Right.
it's honest. So there is a direct correlation with the Illinois free. This isn't just something a group of legislators dreamt up. Talk about the coalition and the aspect of the connection with the National Freedom Caucus and the Illinois Freedom Caucus.
So Mark Meadows, he was a major part of founding the network, and so they took what they had accomplished, this successful model in D.C., and said, how can we apply this to our General Assemblies? So they founded this network. We now have 10 states, and we're growing. I will tell you that we are launching another state here very soon, and more to come at the end of the year. And so our model is that we take what they've done in D.C., deploy it to the states. The network will send staff. I'm employed by D.C., but I work in Illinois. And so we successfully push out policy, communications, back and forth between D.C. and our General Assemblies to promote conservative policies and messaging. And honestly, try to make sure that our House GOP members are acting like Republicans, because that's unfortunately kind of void in most places.
Well, I love that. And I've been pushing out on my morning Facebook Lives that if for anyone out there, if you've got a Republican rep or even a state senator, just ask them, how come you're not a member of the Freedom Caucus?
Right.
And let's talk about that. So can anybody join the Freedom Caucus?
Anybody who has the proper credentials can join. So, and the state Freedom Caucuses can be bicameral, House or Senate. In Illinois, we happen to be only House members, but there are states that have House and Senate. You have to adhere to the Republican Party platform, which isn't that hard, regardless of what they might tell you across the districts in Illinois. Conservative voting record, small government, no tax increases, school choice, Second Amendment, election integrity. Adhering to all of those things is what will get you invited to join our caucus. And we are expecting, so we've added 2 members already. We expect to grow more as the session gets deeper, because people are seeing what we're doing and they like it.
Okay. And I want to emphasize, these aren't just rules that what was known as the Eastern Bloc.
No.
These aren't rules that just a group of a conservative Illinois House members made up. These are rules that come straight and are overseen by the National Freedom Caucus. I just want to keep emphasizing that.
Right.
That's important.
There is a strong connection between House Freedom Caucus and Congress and State Freedom Caucus Network.
All right. Why don't you tell us about some of the things that's been taking place where the Freedom Caucus has been making a difference?
Sure. We'll go back to January. And like we already discussed, the House rule changes in D.C., well, we kind of had that in Springfield, too. You're familiar with the consent calendar with your time in Springfield. The consent calendar, like many things, began as this kind of pure idea to move business through that was non-controversial. And, of course, the Democrats had been using it in years past to hide bills that were substantive and push them through. So we had decided that we wanted to try to stop that process and defeat the consent calendar because bills deserve to be heard on the floor. They deserve to have debate. The people should have their voice heard during bill debate. And so we successfully negotiated the defeat of the consent calendar, and it was pulled out of the House rules for Illinois. So that was a major victory. And we saw, you've probably seen we had several hours of debate last week. Some of that's because they got way behind because they weren't sure how to manage their own schedule, but we got to hear hours of debate on the House floor, good debate over bills that would have otherwise gone silent. Another thing, last week we were in Danville, Illinois. It's an abortion clinic going in up there. These people had tried to kind of silently purchase this property in Danville. We caught wind of it, kind of sounded the alarm, and now there are no secrets. We had great media coverage up there trying to prevent this abortion clinic. Did you know that people in Danville have to drive 40 minutes to have a child? There is no birth and delivery care in Danville anymore. But now they could possibly have an abortion if this clinic was to go through.
Let's talk just a minute about that because I love how the Freedom Caucus, jumped on that, went over there, did the press conference to raise awareness.
Right.
A gentleman from Effingham that's works as a surveyor in the area, in the Danville area, was called by a member of the city council and was asked, "Hey, will you come? We're trying to sell this property." It was a former eye optometrist a building, I believe.
Dillman.
So it was under already classified as medical, and this staunch pro-life gentleman from Effingham was asked to come and just, "Hey, Duke, can you survey this for us so we can move it on?" And the Holy Spirit prompted him to ask the question: "Is this for a real medical facility, or is it for an abortion clinic?" And the person on the other side of the city council member said, "Well, actually, yes, it is for an abortion clinic." And he said, "There is absolutely no way I will come and do that." And then he began to push that information out, brought a gentleman from Texas to kind of raise more awareness, and then you guys got involved.
Right.
People need to understand the power of one, speaking up. That's not being ashamed, and that's exactly what the Freedom Caucus is doing. They are fighting it right now against all odds. They are the super minority of the Republican Party. But as we begin to stand and educate people and help them understand what the Republican platform is, all the solutions to our problems here in Illinois and this nation reside in that. But we've got to have men and women who will stand firm on that foundation and speak up. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And we had 50 or 60 people in the middle of a workday turn out for that press conference. It kind of became a rally, really, for pro-life, and that just goes to show you that community simply does not want that clinic there. They are loud and clear on that, and so I look forward to seeing how the city council and the community is going to address that concern and possibly get this put to a stop. But yeah, that was a great event we did just last week, and then the end of last week, another major headline has been, the shenanigans of the Illinois House floor. So oftentimes we see in the state of Illinois, our government is going to work, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. in the cover of night. Nothing good ever happens in Springfield. As you know, I think, what did we pass the Safety Act and all this stuff when you were in the General Assembly just late at night?
The hours of the morning, that's right.
Right. A 1,000-page bill comes to you within an hour and you vote on it and people wake up with a whole new world. So this vote comes to the floor for a bill, and they did what's called short debate. You can only have one speaker on both sides.
And this was even an extended session, right? Where you were supposed to get out on Thursday, and we held it another day on Friday. So this is going into the late hours of Friday night, 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
Yes, correct. Yeah, deadline day. So this bill is called, and they had short debate, and a Democrat rose in opposition of the bill. He took the one opposition spot. Well, then he voted yes, and the speaker cut off debate. So now we have this issue where the Democrats were calling on themselves to speak, taking both slots, no debate. So Dan Caucus.
So I want to make sure that I interrupted you there, and I'm sorry about that. So a controversial bill has come up because of the time frame involved. We've only got 3-4 hours to get this through this last date that they set, and that they waited for the very last day. It's their calendar. And the speaker said, we're only going to allow 2 speakers, one in opposition and one proponent. So someone who favored the bill got ahead of the Republicans. Well, everybody pushes their button, so they knew what they were doing.
The speaker calls it.
So they called on him. He stood up, spoke in opposition of the bill, and then voted for it. Okay, go ahead.
Right, and speaking in opposition is generous. He kind of just asked some mushy questions to suffice and move forward. So Dan Caucus, Freedom Caucus member, he sounds the alarm and says, "Hey, this isn't right. I'm asking for regular debate or something here. We've got a guy talking in opposition who's voting for bill. So then what happens is we call for a verification.
Now, but did all this go down okay? Dan just hits his button and was acknowledged to speak. Let's talk. Give the people.
Yeah.
If you've got the opportunity, especially when session is in and the House or the Senate is in, and if it's getting to be in the late hours of the evening, go to ilga.gov and watch the proceedings, or Bluestream and watch the proceedings. So this isn't, I appreciate what you're doing here, but that's not, he didn't just push the button, was called on and said, hey, I've got a problem here. You guys had to make some noise back there.
They tried to stop it. They tried. He said his piece, and the speaker essentially told him he wasn't recognized and tried to move forward. and that doesn't work for us, So then we kind of started making some noise, and then we got
real noise.
I mean, a serious noise on the House floor.
Beating on tables and
decorum
hollering.
was not followed that night.
Hey,
but hey,
that's what it takes.
That's right. And finally, they recognized our side of the aisle and say, Mr. Speaker, we're calling for a verification. These are the rules. This is what we're allowed to do. And a verification is when you have to have all members at their chairs who voted their switches, and the clerk reads name by name who voted and verifies that they are at their chair. Well,
it's around 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, late at night.
Yep.
And the Democrats knew that they had, and this is what we ultimately discovered, was they had staff and other members voting buttons for people who had been gone for hours.
Which from time to time, if someone gets up, they get called out along the rail to speak.
Right.
Maybe a constituent,
right.
or
get coffee.
They use the restroom, get coffee,
right.
and they say, "Hey, if this bill comes up for a vote me
right.
yes or no." But they're in the bill, they're right there, and they come back. That happens sometimes,
yes, right?
But this is a little different.
This is a little bit different because now you're talking about asking for a verification, and first of all, again, them trying to deny verification because they knew they'd been caught. And so finally, our floor leader and some people negotiated with them. It took, if you watch the video on Blue Room Stream, you can see them all scurrying around the well because they know they've been had. And at this time, they're acting like they're making phone calls and stuff. What they're trying to do is stall to get people back. But eventually, the speaker announced that our request for verification was granted. The clerk reads down the roll, and we found 4 people who had their votes pressed for yes that were not present in the chamber.
Wow.
Those votes were removed. The bill was going to fail. The sponsor pulled the bill. And then what was even sweeter, just a cherry on top for this night was...
And there were still several more bills stacked up. Okay.
Yes, we would have been there for a lot longer
okay.
still. Well, the Democrats didn't have any more votes on the record to pass bills by themselves like they usually do.
Because these people, we assume they headed home.
Right.
Otherwise, they would have come back. They're on the road, I-55, headed to Chicago, okay.
They're not doing the people's business.
Yes.
They've been paid for the day, though.
Yes.
They got that per
diem.
That's
the
right.
pay. That's right.
Yeah, they've had so that they don't care about doing their business of their districts. But the House GOP stands up and goes, "We request a caucus," because they had to have our votes to pass any more bills. And you can actually see the Democrats hitting the tables because they know what's going on. And they weren't going to grant it. We just walked off the floor.
Okay.
And the House stood adjourned.
Okay.
So it just goes to show you that even in the minority, when you stand up and have a purpose, you can get things done. We have to not be content being the minority. There are things we can do if we act like Republicans, if we act like we're strong and have a purpose and have some kind of a cause to fight for.
I love that. And that's what the Freedom Caucus stands for, because many times some of these members who aren't of the Freedom Caucus, and you hear this a lot with what I call career politicians. You hear people say, "Well, I'm voting. I voted no for this, or I voted yes, or and they just talk about voting.
Right.
But where is the fight? We've got to carry the fight to the streets, to the floor, and make sure that we're standing. And right here is a perfect example, because you could have sat back there and hit the acknowledgement button and they ignored it and went on to other business. Right. Think about that. If a group of brave men and women from the Freedom Caucus wouldn't have stood up, beat on the table, made a little noise, all would have been forgotten. That bill would have passed, and the same thing would have happened with several other destructive bills.
Right.
So God bless you guys. That is awesome.
Well, we know the fight's worth it. And like you said, being willing to stand up and get in the trenches and say, this isn't right and this has to stop. Because ultimately we are there to serve our districts, to serve our people that elected you to be there as a public trust.
Right.
That public trust was violated by those actions by the Democrats. And we were just not going to stand for it simply.
Yep. So you're the executive director here in Illinois. Tell me about your role.
My role is to help coordinate the public policy efforts of our caucus. So, we have what's called a legislative agenda. Those priorities I listed earlier: Second Amendment, school choice, educational freedom, mental health freedom, healthcare freedom. We have bills that fall under all those categories. So I help coordinate our bills for those areas, communications with our public statements and informing our grassroots activists of what's going on in Springfield, and then helping in Springfield the day-to-day of coordination. Because what we found is sometimes, because we are part of the Freedom Caucus, we are kind of shadow banned and we're not given the same resources that other members are given. So I'm there to help kind of stand in the gap with our guys and provide those resources. And what we found is people like what we're doing. They like what we're saying. That's why we're growing. They like what we're saying. And being a full-time resource in the Capitol every session day is what DC Network provides to us in Illinois.
All right. You're a product of Clay County.
I am.
All
and Darren Bailey's campaign. I mean,
Well, I'm gonna tell a little bit story here. You may make you blush. Where were you at when I served my first term as state representative in 2019?
I was working in the House clerk's office behind the House chamber.
The House clerk's behind whose office was behind the chamber, I wonder.
Well, yeah.
One Michael J. Madigan. Here's why I'm so proud, and here's why I have so much hope in the future, friends, because this young man, he understood, he got it. We've prayed for you a lot, and I know you were already on that road to recovery, but you were there, and just due to history, and
right.
I hear that all the time from Democrats. Hell, my grandfather would roll over in his grave if he knew. But you were there, you saw what was going on, and God bless you for making that move, because you had a promising future, would have had in the Democrat Party if you would have stayed right there with either that, or you'd be maybe headed to prison with Michael J. Madigan.
Well, that's
in the near future. So
what I would have to say about that is, I would have never known any better if people like you wouldn't have been standing up and offering those opposing viewpoints. I would have in high school described myself as an independent, I guess, but certainly, not a conservative. And then very quickly when I went to college, you hear the horror stories of people going far left. Well, mine was the opposite. First of all, I think my faith in God, that being raised by a God-fearing family grounded me into a place where I started realizing that these things were wrong. The Capitol was not serving the people, and that being a Republican and a conservative stood for family values, faith, and freedom. And that's why for the last 5 years, I have stood firm in those beliefs. So I appreciate you guys for laying that foundation for young people like me.
Well, this is an amazing story for our future. How old are you, Collin?
21.
21. Think about that. 21 years old. You got a busy summer coming up?
Yeah.
What's going on this summer?
Getting married in a month.
All right.
Yep.
God bless you. So you got a bright future ahead of you. And I look forward to working with you. How can people, if they want to follow and see what the Freedom Caucus is doing, where can they go and what can they do?
So IllinoisFreedomCaucus.org is our website, and then there's also just StateFreedomCaucus.org is the network. So those two places will provide the information. Also, our Facebook pages, Twitter, all those, they can find out about us. Illinois Freedom Caucus on Facebook. We've got daily content. Also, we have a newsletter, to a Springfield update and event update, all that
And they
stuff.
can sign up for that, IllinoisFreedomCaucus.org.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Is there anything that we did not cover that you want to throw in?
Nope, just the fact that the fight for freedom never ends.
The fight for freedom never ends. We've got to make sure that when we elect good people into office, whether that's school board, whether it's library, park board, whether it's city council, whether it's a county board, and especially our state reps and our state senators, we've got, and our congressmen and women, we've got to be there with them. We've got to continue to pay attention to what they're doing, because we see it too often. You go to these positions of power and authority, power blinds. People begin compromising their values just so they can get a bill passed, just so they can get something done. And then next thing you know, we're living in 2023 with all of these problems that we had because people didn't stand their ground. So friends out there listening, listen, number one, the story that you've heard today, the power of one, just speaking up and being a difference maker makes all that's how we save our constitutional republic. And that's how this constitutional republic was built. And we've got those young people that you see having an interest in politics in high school and college. Encourage them to be a part of the system. Get them up to Springfield to serve with the Freedom Caucus on the House floor, and let them see how government's working. Support them and help them be involved in the local GOP party so that we can get this ship turned around. We will. But dependent on your help, dependent on the people that come alongside us, will be dependent on how long it takes. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure, get out there and vote. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.